Hey there guys, Datsa here, and today I'm going to be talking about how to break down human activity down to just a basic thought, and also how to leverage this ratio to your advantage. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that we're actually going to have a special little showcase of this week's art challenge on our Discord, so stay tuned for that. Without further ado, let's get started. Now, if you break things down to a fundamental level, people either consume or produce something. This is important because they don't have a lot of time for both. You could sit down all day, binge watch Netflix, and eat a whole bunch of Ranch Doritos and not get a single thing actually done. So it's very vital that you break down your time into a very simple ratio. And that ratio is the consumption to production ratio. And all it does is measure the amount of time you consume something versus producing it, often in terms of free time. Now there actually is a danger behind this ratio that I want to address right now, and that is that reading, watching, learning new information really needs to be watched closely, and let me explain. Although learning new things is absolutely stellar, you really need to watch out on how much of that information is actually useful and, more importantly, applicable to what you're doing. Reason being is that a good 90 to 95% of the stuff we learn and we know, we never actually use or apply. And this is probably one of the biggest case examples of how the consumption to production ratio is at its best. The reason being is that the moment that you sit down and you're presented raw data of how much you're actually producing versus how much you're actually consuming, you can really get a feel of how productive you really are with your time. A good way to get started on this technique is to actually time yourself. So if you're going to sit down and watch Netflix, then why don't you go ahead and set yourself a timer? Really see how much time you spent on Netflix itself. And vice versa, if you're sitting there and you're about to work on a project, maybe time yourself on how much you're actually going to work it. And then, over the course of a couple of weeks of doing this, you can really begin to compare data and understand where you are on that spectrum. Not only does this give you raw data to look at, but it also gives you a sense of urgency. When you're sitting there looking at the timer and you notice it going up, you start to feel a little bit antsy and a little bit uncomfortable. And that's okay, because that means that you're keeping track of yourself. And once you have that raw data of how much you consume versus how much you produce, you can tweak it, you can modify yourself, and you can really begin to bend what you actually do with your time. As for the drawing, as you saw in the first half of this video, that's exactly what I did. I sat down, I looked at references, I looked at pictures of airplanes, pictures of rocks, of buildings, and the moment that I was able to gather enough references, I started going on my production side of my ratio, where I started producing designs of my own. As for the second painting in my video, it was doing quite well up until the very end, where I started realizing that it was falling apart. So after the 2-hour recording, which is what you see, I ended up fiddling with it for another few hours, believe it or not, to kind of fix the 3D, such as in that white building in the background, and kind of fix another few different things like values around the edges and stuff like that. So that was definitely an adventure. For this week's artist tip, I want to say that for your artwork, you probably want to have a couple of really strong focus points and have all the other points around it kind of lead to those points. And let me explain. In this piece in particular, that is the second art piece that you've been seeing, what I ended up doing was having two big focus points, and one of them was a spaceship, the other one was from the building. The spaceship, for instance, is half and half, where half of it is a nice, clear, light blue surface, and then the other half is very dark, very mechanical, and most importantly has a very high detail density. As for the building, most of it is a clear, nice white shell, but there's that certain point there, right, where there's a lot of orange bits and bobs, where I added a lot of detail, put a lot of focus in there, put a lot of high contrast, and that's the focus point for the building. Alright, so right now I'm going to show you guys some submissions we had for one of our weekly art challenges, where we had people submit a character that would listen to their favorite song. I really have to say thank you for everyone that took the time and energy to produce and participate in this week's art challenge. It's absolutely awesome, and it makes the whole weekly art challenge an amazing experience. If you're interested in participating in the art challenges yourself, all you have to do is click the link in the description below that says Discord link. Alright guys, that's all I have for you this week, although I really want to hear your thoughts on what you think about the consumption to production ratio, maybe how you'll use it in your life, maybe how it's kind of faulty. I really want to hear about it, so do let me know. Remember that nothing awesome happens inside your comfort zone, and I'll talk to you again real soon.